Okay, so you have the right to critique a piece of work, or art, or film, or game. You have every right to tear apart things that you've paid money for that don't satisfy you. That is your right as a human being and your access to independent thought. Now, as a reviewer for video games, it's actually a tougher job than you might realise. No matter what you say about a game, no matter how much legitimised praise or hate that you might give, you'll always find an audience to the opposing side. Much like rocking up to an orgy, you just can't please everyone. Time and time again, critics have put out scores to be met with a sea of boos, and that's their right to review the game however they want, but it's interesting when critical acclaim does not equal mass support from the player base. With this in mind, I'm Jules for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 critically acclaimed video games that the players hated. Number 10, Grand Theft Auto 4. When GTA 4 released, it instantly went down as one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time, with the Xbox 360 version currently standing at an astonishing 98 on Metacritic. It's one of the best reviewed games ever. Yet, a Metacritic user score of 6.6 maybe tells us that the praise is overblown. Maybe it was down to how much this entry diverted from the series, shedding the carefree attitude of previous titles in favour of a much more measured and mature approach. Maybe it was the fact that while the world was impressive and detailed, it was hampered by loose gunplay and sluggish driving. Maybe it was because, no, Roman, I don't want to go f***ing bowling! Either way, it's a game that is clearly impressive, but maybe not the one that players loved as much as the other entries. Number 9, Far Cry 2. Although it wasn't as well received as its sequel, Far Cry 2 managed to hit a lofty score of 85 from critics when it released back in 2008. You can see why as well, as the title succeeded in creating a dynamic playground for players to cause mayhem in. Unfortunately though, there were a few major sticking points that absolutely dragged down the experience for almost everyone who picked up this title. For one, the weapons you used in the game degraded at a rapid rate, meaning that you were always scrambling during firefights to pick up guns off dead enemies while being riddled with more holes than the plot to Prometheus. This, combined with the malaria mechanic that required you to take medicine at regular intervals and respawning enemies that made exploring the environment a chore, made Far Cry 2 a frustrating gaming experience and dragged down all the moments of brilliance the sequel had to offer, leading to a user Metacritic score of 6.4. Number 8, Mass Effect 3. There's no denying that Mass Effect 3's ending did a lot to sour most players' perception of the whole series, never mind this one game. Reducing 3 RPGs worth of storytelling to a couple of basic choices in the title's final minutes, the climax seemed to contradict a lot of the ethos on decision-making that the franchise had been building. But that isn't the only reason it holds a user rating of 5.7, as the dumbing down of side missions to what amounted to being fetch quests didn't help, nor did the rushed feeling of the title, which hinted loudly at studio time constraints. It's still a great game though for some, and has a wickedly fun multiplayer, but it's maybe not the 89 that critics deemed it to be. Number 7, Destiny 2. Destiny 2 was recently lauded with praise by the critics and hailed as having fixed all of its issues from the original, to which gamers responded with, "You what, mate? This is still absolute bunk." Bunk, I say. It's a fun title, no doubt, but user response has been a sense of disappointment in the single-player and multiplayer aspects. The user rating of 5.5 is centered around the fact that they were led to believe that Bungie would have delivered more, and that this felt very much like Destiny 1.5 without anything truly revolutionary elevating it. Well, except those late-game EXP grinds, am I right? Oh boy! That sure is a thing. Basically, the critics' average score of 85 didn't resonate with the player base, as they felt it didn't live up to the 3-year wait. Number 6, DMC Devil May Cry. If you want to ingratiate yourself with the public, a general rule of thumb is that you don't piss in the face of your fans, then offer them a tissue, but that tissue turns out to be made of their hopes and dreams and you've actually taken a shit in it. Basically what I'm saying is that DMC annoyed a lot of people. It annoyed people because it tried to reboot the series with its new emo-ish Dante and threw all of the series' history under a f***ing bus. It was done to make the game more accessible to the mainstream, which always annoys a hardcore fanbase. However, the game was pretty fun to play once you get over the series making fun of its own heritage. No, you take that wig off! It was enough to keep the user score at 5.1 whatever the case, and sits far away from the 86 the critics slapped all over it. Number 5, Dragon Age 2. After releasing the double whammy of Mass Effect and Dragon Age Origins, BioWare cemented themselves as one of the most beloved developers on the planet. Creating one masterpiece after the next, it seemed, dare I say it, that they could have been the new Rare! They could have been, but they didn't, thanks EA. Thanks Dragon Age 2, thanks everyone, thanks for coming. A clear victim of a rushed schedule, instead of sticking to the grandiose scale of the original game, the sequel swapped an ambitious story and a large game world for something far more character-driven and, well, restricted. Taking place over the same few city courtyards and repeated dungeons, the RPG lacked the variety and imagination that made the first release such a smash hit, only becoming notable for being yet another drop in the fantasy game bucket. While the title wasn't enough to completely tank players' confidence in BioWare, it was enough to make them cautious and set a disastrous precedent for the sequels going forward. Number 4. Evolve. I was so hyped for this game. Got to play it early, I got to abuse people as the monster. Things were pretty thrill-how for Evolve. Then the season passes, then the lack of content, then the repetitious gameplay, then the stagnation of the player base, then just then. The reviews weren't stellar at an average of 76, but they were far more favourable than the user reviews of 4.3, and many contribute this to the low playtime that critics use for reviews versus the elongated player time, which found the game to be emptier than any of my compliments. By the way, love that shirt, you're an absolute legend. Ironic that a game called Evolve felt like a gaming dead end. Ooh, that's smart writing. Number 3, Street Fighter V. After years of waiting for a true follow-up to Street Fighter IV, a sequel finally dropped in 2016 exclusively for PS4 and PC. Unfortunately, Capcom hadn't learned from their fighting game mistakes and delivered a product that was more of a starting point for a sequel rather than the full package. What I really mean is that there was less content than Adam Wilborn's trousers on show here, and the 8-year wait had not produced a lot of bang for your buck. The fighting itself was solid as all hell, resulting in an average critic score of 77, but the lack of key features was enough to put many people off this pugilism, and it sits with a lowly score of 3.6 from the users. Number 2, Modern Warfare 3. Pretty much every Call of Duty has received a kicking from users on Metacritic regardless of whether the game was actually good or not, but Modern Warfare 3 was obliterated by gamers. Ire was aimed at the lack of creative spark in the title, and while it did cap off the story in a relatively satisfying way, it was filled with technical shortcomings and action set pieces that were so over the top that it became a point of ridicule. The multiplayer is also probably one of the worst in the entire series as well, with repeating weapons, perks, and equipment from previous games that failed to add anything new to the table. The map design was also terrible, resulting in constant cheap deaths that led to a rage quit almost every round. These reasons and more are why the game is lumped with a user score of 3.4. Yet for some reason, some weird, almost cash under the table reason, critics loved it, giving it a score of 88. And number 1, Star Wars Battlefront 2. Oh boy! Yeah, this is the hot topic of the minute, isn't it? With a disastrous loot box system, a shaky launch, and sales being down 60% on the 2015 release, things aren't looking too hot for this laser-blasting battle royale. Now, in its defense, and I do say that lightly, EA has attempted to change the course of this collision by changing the game time and time again, but that simply does not do enough to fix the damage done for some, and sits with an appalling 0.9 user score. Ouch! And it's not just these issues that are causing moods. The single player has been labelled as underwhelming and is apparently janked to That's some more technical terms there. Now, while these are all disappointing, critics have praised the gameplay in the multiplayer as well as the ever-impressive visuals. Space battles are some of the best moments in the game, and on-foot clashes are usually filled with excitement. It's a game of two halves, great gameplay with an abundance of terrible business practices lumped on top. The field between the users 0.9 and the critics 78 seems almost like a galaxy far, far away. And that's our list. Got any other games that critics loved but you hated? Well, let me know about them in the comments section below. And why not head back to whatculture.com for more news and articles like this every goddamn day. As always, I've been Jules, you've been awesome, and I'll speak to you soon.